Okay, so welcome everybody. I see people are starting to join. And welcome to Talking 3R Science webinar. My name is Georgia Paloka, and today I will chair together with Marcellus, and I leave to him to the first words in the welcome.
Good, also welcome from my side. Good afternoon. I first welcome our speakers, Chiara, Aiello Holden, and Matthias Herzler, and of course all the participants. And I'm happy to chair this really interesting seminar on a new topic, on a nice connection now today from Constance to Berlin. And just as a very brief background, because you will learn more from the speakers and they need their time, we have a Federal Institute of Risk Assessment, and this is our connection today. And then even on a larger scale, we are talking about a big European project coordinating institutes like the BFR in different countries. This is the PARC project. That's the topic today. It's probably the biggest topic in alternative methods at all in Europe. And I'm happy that we can have this topic and make everybody aware of what's going on there. So I think, Chiara, you are the one to start. And I give the microphone and the screen to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. So I'm going to share my slide. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very proud to be part of the biggest partnership in Europe so far, working for improving the assessment of the risk from chemicals. And today I will present you an overview on behalf of Philip Marx-Stölting that kindly prepare all these presentations. So, as you just mentioned, Marcel, we are 28 countries and hopefully even more, because the idea is to be as like all the countries in Europe. We also have partners from UK, and we have participants as 3 agencies from EU, EEA, EFSA, ECA, and 5 DGs, so from the European Commission. We have a budget of 400 million, and this is co-funded. So half is from the European Commission and half is coming from the partners. And as you can see, it's almost all Europe. PARC is gonna last 7 years. It had recently his first birthday, the 11th and 12th of May. 2023 was the first birthday of PARC. And then it's gonna last until April 2029, yes. So PARC was the outcome of many, many things and activities happening along the time. We have different framework and different directive calls from the Commission through time and many different projects. Maybe you might be familiarized with the ASPIS cluster that is ongoing, Eurotox risk, human biomonitoring for EU that finalized last year. And the ones on the bottom are still ongoing, like panoramics. And now we are gathering all these outputs and having PARC. And the goal is really to fit and follow the chemical strategy for sustainability and reach the goals that we have set for Europe for 2030. If you want to know and be updated about PARC, we have our new website that I invite you to check it out and sign in our newsletter. And of course, as any partnership, we have some structures to make it functional. We have our coordination team by ANSES and also a coordination exchange between national hubs in each country, the EU hub, we have the governing board, advising bodies, and the management body that is from ANSES, as I mentioned. And if you are very curious, because I only have 20 minutes, I invite you to read our paper, A Walk in the Park, and there you can find all the details of each of the work packages I'm gonna describe next. So PARC has 9 work packages, and here you're seeing the coordination team of each one of them and all the institutions involved. And it has three main objectives that are, of course, linked with how we organize the partnership. So we have work package 1, that is the coordination. Work package 2, that really wants to have this common science policy agenda. So it's very connected with regulation and the regulatory agencies. So it's not only science, it's also the applicability of this. Then we have work package 7 for fair data. And in the middle, in blue, we also highlight the more active, like work package 4 is biomonitoring or monitoring and exposure. Work package 5 is hazard assessment. Work package 6 is innovation in regulatory risk assessment, and 8 concept and toolbox. And what I mean with more active, I mean in the lab. So work package 4, 5 are the keystone of research and innovation together with 6 and 8. But of course, we cannot exist one without the other. We also need work package 3 with all the synergies, collaboration, communication, and work package 9 with the infrastructure and human capacity. So from these specific objectives of PARC, I think the diagram is really nicely highlighting work package 2 with this high-level network. That's one of our objectives. Work package 7, 4, 5, 6, and 8, as I explained, with research and innovation. And then for capacities and platform is work package 3 and 9. And now I'm gonna give you some overview of each one of the work packages. So for example, in the core, as I mentioned, we have work package 4, 5, 6, and 8, together with work package 2 to really fulfill this SOP2, this objective. Work package 2, we are lucky because we're gonna have Matthias giving an overview next. So I don't want to take much time here. Work package 3, as I described, is communication. For example, is very broad because it has to deal with all the ambassadors, the stakeholder forum, international board and the national hubs. But of course, it's also like our face is dealing with all the social media, the communication, the website. And as I mentioned at the beginning, work package 4 is taking on the outcomes of human biomonitoring for EU. And it has these 3 specific goals. So the human biomonitoring, the environmental monitoring, and then of course, innovation tools and methodologies derived from their work. In work package 6 is more focused on IATA construction, and they have available different webinars if you want to find out their goals and their outcomes directly from the source, so to say. Work package 7 is working on data policy, data management, making it fair. It have a whole structure of training so that everybody involved in PARC, especially those generating data, of course, they're already familiarized, but that everything is easily accessible in the future and can be used by any other partnership that comes after PARC. Work package 4 have all this concept and toolbox and trainings. And of course, it's safe and sustainable by design and warning system, integrative models. Work package 9 is building all the infrastructure and human capacities, which is also related with the trainings. So all the network of laboratories, building exposure monitoring capacity. So of course, each one of these work packages have to closely work with each other because from the needs, as you saw in work package 4, for example, they develop an innovative method. So of course we want to spread that next with trainings. Is not only getting isolated with each work package 9 will make sure that it's reaching whoever needs these new tools. And now I'm gonna talk about work package 5, which maybe I should have told you from the beginning. I am working closely in work package 5 coordination team. We are a team of 5. And what is work package 5? So we are concentrated on hazard assessment. So filling up data gaps, developing innovative methods, and developing quantitative system toxicology to move forward in hazard assessment. So we are divided in 3. And if you read the paper, A Walk in the Park, you're gonna notice that each of these work packages that I just mentioned briefly, internally, they're also divided in different groups. So us, for example, we have these 3 divisions that are feeding each other. In reality, in practicality, we are 12 projects. So as I mentioned, we have filling up data gaps, novel methodologies, and NGRA. So each one of these are going to feed each other, and each one of these have 2 focus. So data gaps is going to focus in human health, and other projects in environment, same for NAMS, and in task 5.3 is diverse, because this is more working or related with developing PBK or kinetic modeling, AOPs, and system toxicology. So these 12 projects, of course, have their own project leads, and each one of these projects, I'm talking about around ranging from 3, some 12, some 22 different partners. So each one of them is a big joint effort per se inside work package 5. If you go into details, if you're curious of what we're doing in work package 5, so of course these data gaps, we have very specific questions that were selected from workshops with all the people relevant for these topics. It was decided what to fill up first. The first need that was highlighted in already EFSA publications was with toxins, and the toxins are Alternaria and Eniantis. So these are natural toxins that are in the environment. They're not developed by any industry. They don't have anybody that really applies to make any apply on REACH to test. And so it's very important that we fill up these data gaps. And another important topic is bisphenol alternatives. So we really want to avoid regrettable substitutions. And that's why this was one of the substances selected for data gaps in human health, and similar for the environment. At the next task or group of projects we have, developing novel methodologies. So we have 5, and these are divided per endpoints. And these are endpoints that are also highlighted in the chemical strategy. So the focus is to really create novel methodologies to assess faster and better assess, hopefully also with less animals, and more efficient and cheaper, if possible, these 5 endpoints that you can see here in green. So non-genotoxic carcinogens, metabolic disruption, thyroid hormone disruption, immunotoxicity, neurotoxicity. And also we have similar in these 5 endpoints for environment, but at the moment we have them linked with filling up data gaps. So this is a very big project. This is just some examples of, we have already some outputs. For DNT, this is sort to say a hot topic, very, well, everything is relevant. DNT is just an example of one of the outputs we have at the moment. This is one of our first publications in Work Package 5. And also in metabolism. If you are curious, in our website of PARC, you can find all the publications of everything I'm showing you right now. So you can go ahead and read it. And in 3, so we have, the goal is to use everything and all the outputs that have been generated in all the projects I've showed you already. And we are also working closely together with Work Package 6, because if you remember, they are the ones developing IATAs, and this is closely linked with AOPs and PBTK modeling and everything that these projects are doing. So I'm sorry if I talk too fast or too slow, I don't know. This is us. I'm missing the photo of my colleague Talia. And yeah, if you have any question, feel free to do it at the end of the presentation, if I understood right.
Matthias, you want to continue? And indeed, the question will be collected at the end via the Q&A.
Yes. So, hello everybody, my name is Matthias Herzler. I'm heading the unit Coordination and Assessment Strategies in the Department of Chemical and Product Safety at the BFR. In our department, we are responsible for a lot of different chemical risk assessments regarding REACH, but also food contact materials, tobacco, tattoos, the specific focus on nanomaterials and so on and so forth. We also have a research groups. And I'm also, and that's why I'm here and speaking to you today, co-lead of one of the tasks in PARC Work Package 2, which I'm going to present you in a minute. And PARC Work Package 2 is actually called, as Chiara already pointed out, a common science policy agenda. And it contains both aspects, the input from the regulatory world, from the policy world into the work of PARC, but also the uptake of the work of PARC eventually into regulatory practice. Work Package 2 is led by the European Environment Agency, EEA, but also by the Austrian Environmental Authority, EAA. And task 2.1, which is one of 3 tasks in Work Package 2, is on priority setting. It's led by the French colleagues from ANSES and by the 2 European agencies, ECHA and EFSA, the Chemicals Agency and the Food Safety Authority. And basically they are responsible for, coordinating a global structured approach to priorities and the framework for priority setting. I'll show you some slides from them. Then there's task 2.2, which we are co-leading at BFR together with our colleagues from the National Institute of Health in Portugal, INSA. And that's called knowledge management and uptake into policy. And I will present you a lot of slides on this task because I know it very well. The task 2.3 then is called sustainability. This is, however, not about the sustainability of chemicals or sustainable development or something like that. It's in fact about the sustainability of PARC itself, because PARC will end in 2029, as Chiara pointed out. And somehow we want to establish some kind of continuity beyond that point. So task 2.2, a brief slide. How does prioritization work? This is actually a scheme that should work this year. The first year of PARC was prioritized before PARC was even in place, naturally. But the process is about as follows. It starts with work packages or task leads making a proposal. They submit a template to the CT, which is the coordination team of PARC, Work Package 1. They check it for some formal issues, and then there's a first regulatory relevance check, and then this project proposal is sent to reviewers. They do a peer review, come to some conclusions, and either they recommend it as it is, or they propose some refinements after all. And then this goes to the management board, which is, as was shown before, the assembly of all work package leaders, and they will have a vote on this, and either the project in this form as proposed is rejected, or it is accepted, in which case then the normal project cycle starts and sometime later is concluded, but this is not in the remit of task 2.1 anymore. So what are criteria for prioritization that were used in the first round before PARC? So the next round will maybe see some slightly different criteria. So there was one, PARC is kind of a follow-up to certain initiatives. One of these is HBM4EU, which some of you might know, a project on human biomonitoring in the EU and developing new methods there. And they had a prioritization scheme, and some of the priorities were carried over into PARC. Also, there were surveys. Then, as mentioned by Chiara, there's the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability, or CSS. Then the work package leaders and task leaders were asked to identify regulatory needs that should be addressed. And then some other priorities were used as well. Also, as was already shown, there are some priority substances. On the right-hand side of this table, you see the 3 work packages 4, 5, and 6 on exposure, hazard, and risk assessment methodology, which have slightly different focus in some areas. But you see there are obviously some very prominent candidates like PFAS or bisphenol A and analogs that were mentioned already, but also some metals are there, and some broader categories such as endocrine disrupting compounds or metabolic disrupting compounds, which is rather a new thing to add to the mix, I guess. So on the other side of the work package, we have task 2.3 on sustainability. And one of the 2 activities they have is coordinating what's called the national hubs. The national hubs are actually in each country that is participating in PARC, in each member state or country, there is a national hub formed mostly by colleagues from the academic community. And so the national hubs gather their input, and also the PARC output is presented to them and discussed. And so this is connecting you to the local or national landscape of research and also the regulatory landscape to some degree. Some authorities are there as well. And this task 2.3 coordinates a process where the needs of these national hubs are gathered. There is something called the national hub contact points in each country, and they have a meeting. And so there are surveys, there are meetings and training and capacity activities to connect PARC here. And also the second important thing they do is develop an exit strategy, as I mentioned already, for PARC. They need to identify the activities that need to be continued beyond PARC. And also they will try to develop an overarching and rather holistic long-term approach to establish research and innovation in chemical risk assessment in the European Union, which can then continue after PARC. So PARC is the starting point maybe, but this can live on without PARC maybe. Also, as with every great project, you have success indicators, and of course there are indicators regarding this sustainability thing, and they are monitoring this. They have helped create these indicators, and now they help monitoring them and the success or not of PARC. So after this brief introduction to the 2 other tasks, I'll come to the task where I know more about, which is the task that we are co-leading. And it has 2 projects, 2 basic activities. One is called, or has the working title, PARCopedia. And as the name suggests, it's something, sounds a little bit like encyclopedia or Wikipedia or something. This refers to our task title, which is Knowledge Management and Uptake into Policy. This refers mostly to the knowledge management PARC. So it started as a knowledge management platform in our heads, an online knowledge platform where you could create and share knowledge on chemical risk assessment, all its facets and specifically new methods, of course. But then the longer we thought about it, we also felt that we need some kind of a community space for professionals in chemical risk assessment. So CRA is for chemical risk assessment here. And to connect actually people from different disciplines, you know, the chemical risk assessment is a multidisciplinary world. We have researchers, risk assessors, risk managers, academics, people from authorities, industry, and so on and so forth, although industry is not a direct partner in PARC, I should mention that. And we really felt that part of the problems that we have in establishing new methods come from the fact that we do not have a central meeting point where people can discuss and also push for innovation together. We have these meetings within projects and so on, but there is no central space for this. And we hope to be able to establish such a space with PARCopedia. Why do we need such a space? If we really want to bring about the change, also in the spirit of the 3 Rs in chemical risk assessment, then we need consensus within a broad and diverse community, as I just mentioned. And that, for one, requires good understanding of new methods on all sides. And as we all know, there's different views, but also sometimes a real lack of understanding the potential or the lack of potential of certain new methods, for instance, on the world of risk assessors or risk managers. So we felt there's a tool needed to connect people to share their work, to present themselves, to exchange ideas, and also discuss new approaches, and hopefully also in a critical fashion. Because, as you all are probably also aware, we have kind of a Tower of Babel situation, I'm sorry, where many people speak different languages. People from environmental risk assessment do not always speak the same language as people from the human health side. In vitro people are maybe different from in vivo people, and so on and so forth. And we hope that over the period of PARC, and maybe even beyond, we will be able to better connect these people and make them understand better each other. So how do we imagine typical Parcopedia users? It is the chemical risk assessment community, so some kind of a professional level is expected. You should have expertise within the scientific domain or other fields of risk assessment, risk communication, management, policy making, etc. Everybody joining there probably requires a general understanding of the chemical risk assessment process, but may have a different role there. And people might not have detailed knowledge about particular aspects outside of their own direct line of work. So we also need to take care that the content presented, at least the main content, is understandable by everyone. However, having said that, it will not be limited in the way that people are excluded. So registration will be open to users from both in and outside of PARC. But I can tell you, if you are not familiar with certain aspects, then it's probably maybe not the best experience that you will have on this platform. What can you find in Parcopedia? There will be a knowledge base, very much like a wiki, hopefully looking better than Wikipedia, but a knowledge base covering eventually all aspects of chemical risk assessment. I mean, we will start with a certain set of information, but we'll build on that gradually. There will be a specific focus on innovation, on new approach methods, NAMs, and next generation risk assessment, NGRA. And as I said, there will be a community space, which is very much like a social media platform. You will have profiles, you can post blogs, you can take part in discussion groups, etc. And if I say you, I really mean you, because you are working in the field of 3R, I understand. And if you're also working in the fields of chemical assessment, which I don't know for sure, some may more be in the medical field or so on. But if you are interested, you are invited to present yourself and your work, to exchange points of view, to comment on what's new in Parcopedia, etc., and to interact with a lively and interdisciplinary community, and ultimately help us shape the CRA chemical risk assessment of tomorrow. The timeline is shown here. You don't have to look at it in detail. The important point for you is that we're still building it, but the launch is foreseen for the end of October, possibly end of November. So we already presented a scoping study as a deliverable within PARC. This will eventually be available on the website. I think it's not yet, but it's approved, so it should be there soon. Whereas the PARC, we already know the name of the Parcopedia domain, Parcopedia EU, but it's not live yet. It will start at the end of October or possibly mid-November, because there will be a launch event accompanying this. The second product that we have, or activity in our portfolio in task 2.2, is a totally different thing, and it's called PARC Route. And PARC Route, as it says here, is a horizontal project which will develop and oversee the implementation of strategic roadmaps in order to promote the uptake of innovative science in chemical risk assessment practice. And in fact, the task is set up such that different roadmaps can be generated, but we have started with just one, and that we call it NGRA route, because it proposes a path for the regulatory uptake of next generation risk assessment in European legislation. And the focus is really on the legal uptake part, because of course we're not a legislator, we can only make proposals and point out how this could be done. But this is actually an aspect that has been missing in many of the otherwise very successful great European projects, but they always somehow stopped at the scientific level. They may be considered regulatory needs, but they never actively planned for how to implement their knowledge, the knowledge they generated, into regulatory practice. Why do we need next generation risk assessment? Our current system has procedural issues, efficiency issues mainly. We spend a lot of resources. The speed is gruesome that we have. We should be much faster. We should be able to assess risks from a much higher number of chemicals than we are currently capable. There are also scientific problems, as most of you will know for sure if you are in this webinar, in vivo toxicity testing is still largely a black box. We need better mechanistic understanding. We need to cross the species barrier. We should use tissue relevant to the organism for which we do the assessment and so on. And there are new challenges that are not very well addressed within animal testing, such as combination effects, or to integrate human health and environmental chemical risk assessment. Of course, there are the ethical components. I thought I didn't have to mention that here. So what can PARC offer here? PARC, for me at least, is a one-in-a-generation chance, although there are also challenges. But first to the chances. In PARC, as was shown, we have a partnership of the European authorities in the driver's seat. So the member states, but also the European agencies, the European Commission. There are risk assessors and managers on board, and I don't know why I forgot it, but also researchers, of course, are on board from the academic field. And there's an explicit focus on new methods. Chiara showed that there's one of the specific goals explicitly mentioning next generation risk assessment. And there's a strategic focus on regulatory needs and implementation. Besides, if you have taken part in certain meetings over the last years, and if you have read the Green Deal and the chemical strategy, there's somehow a general feeling of departure into a new era here. So these are great chances for us. There are also challenges. Of course, there are unsolved scientific questions such as in vitro to in vivo extrapolation, quantitative adverse outcome pathways, and a lot of other things that need to be sorted out. And people are working on this. And I'm very confident that we will be able to establish very good new methods here, new strategies. But in PARC, over the years, you will have hundreds of different projects, and those need strategic alignment. And we need to engage a significant fraction of the community to find acceptance. And again, that needs a strategy or a vision and a strategy, which are used because one popular example of how you could do this is the Tox21 program in the US. So in 2004, they presented a vision and then a roadmap document. Then in 2007, this probably well-known document, Vision and the Strategy, Toxicity Testing in the 21st Century. And they continued working on that. They make institutional agreements, renewed this, and now this program is fully running. Although that must also be said, again, for this strategy or vision, this was very much focusing on the scientific strategy to establish the new system, whereas a strategy for regulatory uptake is equally important, but was not yet covered in their roadmap to a large extent, also owing to differences in the legal system in the US. So the point is that if we want to install such a change here, we need a collective effort. We need to have a dialogue between science and policy, but we also need a good structure and a good strategy. You don't have to read all the details here, but the basic statement is here that you have a regulatory policy level that defines the policy needs and identifies possible gaps or needs. I've pointed out some of those. And then you see the need for a change, but then you also need to define the specific goals of the change, top down. What do you need to, up there in the legislation? And then you can try to develop a concept for how to bring about this change. This is just the general logic for such a roadmap. If you do know that, then you can start identifying key players in the regulatory processes, also in the processes for changing legislation. You can analyze the odds and resources and timelines, and then you are able eventually to write such a strategic roadmap. What do you want to install? How can you do it? What is the process? Who are the responsible people that you need to convince and so on? But for that, we want a broad consensus, a science to policy network, which we gradually are starting to build now. It includes, first and foremost, of course, the PARC colleagues in the work packages, management board, governing board, grant signatory board, the national hubs I mentioned, also the stakeholder forum where industry is present, and also the international board where colleagues from the US, for instance, are involved, and they can give us very good guidance here, I think. And then other external partners will be considered as well. We already have started establishing collaboration with projects from the ASPIS cluster. I myself, as Marcel and Georgia and so on, am involved in the Risk Hunter project, which is part of the ASPIS cluster. Other colleagues from Risk Hunter are also active under PARC, so there's a big network being built and being growing here, which is really helpful. But who knows, even non-governmental organizations eventually need to be involved probably for acceptance building. So the current vision for the roadmap, and I'm almost done with my presentation, the current vision, which is an interim formulation, it will need much more discussion, but we came up with a vision that by April 2025, this is the deadline for presenting the first roadmap, that we will provide a concrete and applicable roadmap proposal for implementing next generation risk assessment as the default approach to chemical risk assessment in new chemical legislation. Now, this needs to be explained. What do I mean by default approach? It doesn't mean we can live, by April 2025, we already know exactly in all fields of risk assessment how NGRA can replace the current paradigm. It means that we should have a mindset change, actually. We should install NGRA as the first tier, the first line of risk assessment, which you always have to try. And only if that's not possible, can you go to some higher tier, possibly even with in vivo testing, which will stay with us for quite some time. But there need to be strict rules. And this is the mindset change, which really could also bring to life things like, under REACH, we have Article 25, I believe it is, where it says animal testing is only the last resort, but that never has been filled with life. This is a translation. This vision is sort of a translation of that paradigm. Maybe I skipped this a little. These are only the steps that we will have to go. It's a long journey towards this roadmap. We have established the vision and scope. We need to capture contextual aspects of NGRA and then do some focused research. We're in the middle of that, and categorize the information that we have from the literature, from existing projects, so that if we work on a different specific topic and a specific contextual aspect of NGRA, we find all the material that's already there, and we do not reinvent the wheel. And then, and this is happening currently, I don't know if you know that, in projects such as Risk Hunter or the ASPIS cluster, we need to kind of generalize NGR framework corresponding to certain risk assessment workflows. This is another presentation. You will probably hear of this later on in the coming years in another webinar. Then we can identify the needs, the necessary changes as I showed, the gaps and obstacles and so on, bringing us to a strategy for transitioning, and ultimately we can finalize the roadmap document. So the timeline for this is that we are still in the middle of the research work. Over the summer, we will continue the research. We will also we have started developing a detailed work plan for the different aspects and chapters of the roadmap. And by 2024, April 2024, we will probably have a first draft document, which we can then discuss with a broad circle of people. And hopefully by end of April 2025, we'll have the final roadmap. Only now we can say that for the part where we are working on the human health assessment, it's likely that we can do it. But we have already identified that in the area of environmental risk assessment, there are many new interesting approaches, many next generation risk assessment approaches. But as in terms of developing a framework, they are not probably quite as far as the human health sector yet. So it might be that by April 2025, they will not have been able to develop such a comparable roadmap. We'll see for that. And with that, I'd like to conclude. I'd like to thank my colleague Isabella for helping me prepare the slides, and also some other colleagues from Work Package 2 who contributed some of the slides on the other tasks. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Matthias and Chiara. So it was a great overview. I think everybody should be aware of what is going on, and I'm sorry for those that missed it, because it's really an enormous activity, and you also presented a very big vision. Yeah, let's perhaps start to get warm. Matthias, you are like the perfect German, like with all the big planning and doing everything decently, involving everyone, and then having the ready-made product ready in 2 years. So we have seen the others have had a roadmap, like the EPA, EFSA. They are relatively light and thin, and some of them have had to kind of revise it already. of course, they have political input, change of government in the US and different things. What would you say, like, would there be also a way to have kind of intermediate steps or a light version in between, something to be pre-discussed?
Okay. So I don't know about the perfect German. At least I try not to have the German angst for this, because it's really frightening at times if you think about what we want to do or achieve. No, let's stay optimistic, and I'm realistic too, because I mean, let's face it, if it's not April 2025, but June or July 2025, nobody will be hurt. But still, I think it's feasible. And what I did not make clear so much is that, of course, or I used the word transitioning. So certainly this roadmap will have steps how to get there, and will not say 2025 we're ready and now you need 2 years and then 2027 it's done. It's certainly not working like that. But as I said, I think we need this mindset change. If we can establish that, if people say, okay, from now on we do it the NGRA way, and only if we can't do it, then we have to do something else. But then we know exactly what to work on, which needs to be removed quickly. I mean, hell, we could start now. You know, we could just say now every time we start with NGRA, what little we have in our hands, we try all the time, and only then we have to prove that this is not enough, and then we go to the second testing. Also, if I may say, add something, I don't know, I don't want to speak all the time. The point is that currently our system is I'm talking mostly about REACH, which is the world I'm coming from, and that's quite an inflexible system. We have a lot of standard information requirements for high tonnage substances, but in many of the big in vivo tests, we find in the end that the chemical didn't cause any adverse effect. I mean, the numbers vary, but people say up to 70% of the chemicals do not produce very many adverse effects. 20 or 30% do, and we have to take care of them. But how to be more flexible, how to maybe find out better before for which chemicals these tests are really valuable and promising to show us with that. I mean, and then maybe the things like the prenatal developmental toxicity test will stay with us for quite some time. I'm quite convinced of that. But for other tests, we might have better solutions.
Perhaps a short follow-up. So these ideas have been promoted in the scientific world for 20 years or longer. And it has had a very partial success, let's call it like this, optimistically. In other worlds and other areas, a bit more than in REACH and the chemical legislation. And as you mentioned, it is very rigid. So what gives me hope is if people like you now have this vision, because you come from the regulatory side. So scientists are a bit further away. So on the one hand, perhaps in being realistic about what can be reached, on the other hand, also with what they can do and who they can reach. But also regulators like you, they are not legislators. And still, you need to transition to another sector and pool to have the legislation changed. Mm-hmm. And in Europe, for instance, there's classification and labeling, which is not an issue so much in the US. And then also the NGRA has to address the classification and labeling requirements and the fixed data requirements. So is there any more defined vision already now how this can be done on the legislative level? Because even if people want to, they, you know, like Eka often claims we can't behave in a different way because we have our law.
This is exactly what this PARC root project is all about. But I see, of course, that there are forces of continuation or of forces that are kind of, they do not embrace change, let me call it that. But there is this general feeling, I think, that more can be achieved now. And the partnership really consists of all the member states' authorities. And so even if, you know, if it comes from them and proposals to the legislature are made from that side. Also, for instance, in Germany, we have the environmental ministry. They are also part of the governing board of PARC. So they have shown interest. And the hope is what I showed also with the Parkopedia thing. This is a place where these people now start talking to each other about it. Of course, as in all the projects, I'm not representative of all the people in BFR. The guys from the ministry or the colleagues who are in PARC are specifically interested in this, probably more than other colleagues in the ministry, but they are multiplicators. The Commission overall will not be enthusiastic about letting other people tell them how they could change the legislation. But we have to work hard for this. Otherwise, it needs to be a top-down thing. That's I'm convinced of. But at the same time, we need to have the acceptance with the everyday risk assessor and so on. But they, if it comes from top down, if it comes from above, if OECD tells them, yes, that's a good thing, if the law tells them you can do it, then they can be trained to accept that. And in the US, they have a totally different approach. They can basically FDA uses this qualifying approach. They say these methods are basically fine, and now you can use them, They don't wait for an OECD validation all the time. But it's a long way in Europe to this kind of.
It is a very difficult question in the chat. Say that it's very impressive work, but how is finance and has the project enough funding?
No, as every project, no. Maybe Chiara wants to say for Work Package 5, but they have a little more funding, but a lot of more projects. No, as was said, the project budget is 400 million, which seems a lot. Then it's 7 years. Then you have 200, I repeat, 200 partners. So that's 2 million on average per partner for 7 years. That's 300,000 per partner and year, So you see what sounds a lot isn't that much in the end, but it's co-fund, and also the funding is co-funding. So the basic principle is not the coordination stuff, but member states contribute 200 million or up to 200, one should say, and the Commission pays half, or actually member states contribute 400 and the Commission will pay them 200 back. But if the member states only spend 100 million, then the Commission only pays them 50. So whether really 400 million will be spent in the end, we'll see. For instance, in the first year, setting up things was quite slow in some areas, and not all the person months that were calculated have really been used.
I also have a question about the prioritization of the project. So then, I don't know if I missed it, but also then what is already ongoing was considered in selecting the project. Because for instance, I saw now in PARC that there is a call also for synergies. So one can, if one has run a project, could be in contact. So I was wondering if then in selecting the project, one also have tried to find the gaps of what is not yet, what is not already ongoing in Europe or in other initiatives.
Maybe Chiara also wants to say something on that, but synergies are definitely a topic. I try to make it clear that for the roadmap, we need to embrace really a lot of other initiatives and projects. And the good thing is there is a duplication of stuff because there's not enough funding and there's not enough people. It's always the same people, only now they also work in PARC, and this is a big connecting thing. But Chiara, maybe you want to comment.
That's a very good question, and I can only speak for Work Package 5, which is the most heavily research focused. What we do, we have cycles. So we have projects at the moment that have been selected, these 12 projects that I share, and they are gonna go for 3 to 4 years. And then afterwards, of course, the second round of projects will continue. Most likely is a follow-up of what has been set up with different questions depending on the outcomes, for example, in data gaps. And then continuously, if some partners have the budget and is between when some partners are from PARC and they have the budget between the frame and they have a new question, they can apply again. As Matthias showed, we have this annual cycle to approve new projects. So that's the beauty of PARC, that is kind of established, but it also has some flexibility. And it's gonna fit itself also. Like if we in data gaps see something relevant for BPA alternative or has some other questions about natural toxins, then the idea is that Work Package 4 biomonitoring might follow up this in the next cycle. Yeah. So we have some flexibility, but we also need to establish some framework to work. So we have this first cycle of 3 years, and yeah, I hope I answered your question. Yeah, Matthias.
Yeah,
I don't know if I understood it. Thanks. you also referred to things happening outside of PARC, or did I get that wrong?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
I think, as I said, people are very well connected, the people in PARC, and they are aware of these initiatives. And collectively, with our swarm intelligence, we know them all, so to speak. And hopefully, or at least that's foreseen, in the prioritization process, one would identify things that basically duplicate something that's happening outside of PARC. This really needs to be avoided, and this is the intention. Whether it will succeed all of the time, I don't know. But
we have another question in the chat. It's in which way NGOs can be involved to inform, for instance, the general public in an easy way, so the bubbles could be overcome.
So you already saw one way from starting from October or November. Of course, they are able to register for Parkopedia, for the platform, where they get certain things from in and outside of PARC firsthand. But also, of course, there's the PARC website. And the PARC Work Package 3 is the one that's basically, you know, in charge of the official dissemination thing. When there are deliverables, they put them on the website. They have the newsletter that was mentioned. The website is still also a little bit building up, but all the information eventually will be there, and NGOs can access it. There is, I'm not sure actually, do you know, Chiara, whether the stakeholder forum also includes NGOs? One would think so.
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, yes. Also, some NGOs have reached out, and there are many channels, and normally the stakeholder forum is one of them. And we're trying to see if some national hubs, so each member state have their national hub, each member state, how would you explain it, Matthias? Because I always...
Yeah, I think member states, so there are some non-EU people, you know, associated in it, so they are countries, whatever. But
so because they want to have this outreach per country, so maybe if the NGO is working locally, this is another path to get in touch with PARC. But I will say the direct way, the easy way, besides Parkopedia, is also the website. Yeah.
And that's already online, so.
Yes.
Good. So that's why we have you here. And I hope you get lots of requests and contacts. Perhaps I can briefly follow up, because the other big stakeholder group is industry. And there's lots of experience there, and those are the ones that would need to do still the registrations. So what's the involvement there? Because in the beginning that was kind of out.
So they cannot be part. It's a public partnership, so industry cannot be involved as a partner. You know, there are these so-called affiliated entities, such as the University of Constance, from the academic field, but again, not industry. Industry is represented by means of the stakeholder forum, where we have the big associations, I believe, CIFIC, ESTITALK, these people, so they have an input. But I believe individual projects and activities have some liberty or leeway to consult with colleagues from industry. For instance, we, for the roadmap, certainly plan to involve them. In what format will be seen, maybe workshops, whatever, surveys, and so on, but they will certainly will be heard, because otherwise you will not get ultimate acceptance for these things. You know, we also need to convince them that it's something that's good for them in the end.
It's really important, yeah.
But for instance, for next generation risk assessment, as you know, in Risk Hunter, we are very well connected to people from the cosmetics industry who, again, by a top-down stipulation, are forced to try their best to assess repeat dose toxicity without animal testing. And we know what these people do. Sometimes we work together with them in other projects. And even if it's not officially in PARC, I guess there will be a lot of influence from other initiatives on this.
Perhaps briefly, so time is running. In the US, there has been kind of similar activities, and then they realized there's an issue with setting the certainty level that needs to be reached. Because of course, if the regulators or the recipients require a certainty that cannot be provided by NAM, then this is bound to fail. And the assumption is often that 100% certainty is only reached with animals. Now, the Americans started to re-evaluate the animals in order to set a certainty level. Wouldn't that be really important to secure success of PARC?
Yes, yes. Of course, animal experiments do not give us 100% certainty because there's never 100% certainty in life. And I think this, again, you know, pertains to the mindset change that we somehow need. So it's rather to be, in my view, you cannot say like it's 70% as certain as the other thing or so. You don't need numbers for that. You just need a general trust that the outcome of the whole framework that I was talking about will be of a comparable level of safety, or will provide a comparable level of safety. And some initiatives actually have been trying to compare points of departure for risk assessment from NAMs with in vivo tests. They found that the NAM PODs are even lower, but that again is also maybe not desirable for society. We don't want to have artificially low threshold values or an exaggerated risk from some weird in vitro endpoint that's never, you know, relevant in vivo. So it needs to be balanced, and this is the tricky thing, because once you start discussing this, you need to admit that the current system also has its uncertainties, and that's obviously not popular with everybody.
That's the point.
I should make the point, though, that the current system is very safe, and I mean it. It really protects a high level, provides a high level of protection for our health, as you can see from us getting older all the time and staying healthy longer.
So we try to keep this really crisp and short, so people can follow many of these seminars. I think this was an extremely valuable hour. Thank you again, Chiara and Matthias. We hope for follow-up. I think we can already start planning now, like see an intermediate stage and then especially the roadmap. And in the meantime, we will have learned on some of the side aspects. So Georgia is just showing on the screen, there will be more of these seminars. And I think it's nice to follow, like really from the lab up to the big application and vision that we have seen today, and to stay on track there. So thanks everybody, especially the presenters, but of course also the discussants and participants here in the seminar. Especially thanks to Georgia and all the team for organizing this series, and have a nice evening.